Good evening, and calling the meeting to order. Welcome to the West Hartford Public Schools regular Board of Education meeting. It is Tuesday, October the 3rd, 2023. Charlotte, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Fernandez?
Present.
Mr. Goldman?
Present.
Dr. Harris?
Here.
Dr. Kamauf?
Here.
Mrs. Nazarella?
Present.
Dr. Steinberg?
Here.
Dr. Thomas-Farquharson?
Here.
Student Representative Liam Wright?
Here.
Student Representative Chris Kimmel?
Here.
Thank you. And Liam, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do not have a revision to the agenda order. Before proceeding to public communications, I would like to use point of privilege to request a moment of silence, and that is in honor of a representative of our community whose wife we are familiar with. She is our predecessor. She served on the Board of Education and was our previous, during her term, served as vice chair. She is currently our representative within town and gives back in many ways. I'm referring to Representative Tammy Exum. And we are aware that Tammy's husband unexpectedly passed away 2 days ago. And so the community is grieving. Her husband, Earl Exum, gave to our community endlessly, not only within our school system, but within our town. He was a mentor. He was an advocate for all in our town. We have seen him at the board meetings as well, advocating for all in our town. And I think it is only respectful for us to recognize the loss that we have, and I'm going again to request a moment of silence. Thank you. And with that, we will proceed to public communications. That is where we're able to hear from you, your thoughts, your questions, your concerns, your suggestions. Each individual is allowed 3 minutes to speak, and we ask that you please be mindful of Charlotte, who will hold up a yellow card when you have 1 minute remaining in your time. And when your time is expired, you will see a red card. Please know that we are attentively listening to you as you speak. However, it is policy that we do not respond to comments as they are being made. When you come to the podium, please do share your name and your town of residence. With this being the first meeting of the month, we are receiving comments on both agenda and non-agenda items. However, we will prioritize beginning with those speaking on agenda items. Looking at the list, I do not see anyone that has signed up for an agenda item. However, I will ask those in the audience, does anyone care to speak on an agenda item? And tonight's agenda items include accepting and revising new policies, as well as state assessment results. Is there anyone who chooses to speak on an agenda item? Seeing none, moving now to the list of those who've signed up to speak on general comments, beginning with Mark Walsh.
Mark Walsh, 33 Huckleberry Lane. First, I want to say that when we say the Pledge of Allegiance in this room, I hope it exposes the hypocrisies that I've witnessed in here and watched at home. That being said, last year, I came in here with this report. I believe I'm the only one that possesses this. This is the report on the incomplete report, I'll say, on the 11-year-old student that hung themselves at Bristow. I pleaded with all of you here, every official in town, people on the outside, the NAACP, BLM 860, and everybody's ignored me, including all of the media. And, you know, this is just leading me into what I found on the rest of, you know, what's going on in town as far as public safety and all the secrecy or the cloak of secrecy. 3 weeks ago, we had a pistol whipping right across the street on a Saturday night in West Hartford Center. It took 2 weeks for the police department to release a statement after the arrest of an alleged murderer who was out on bond. Out in LAX, they arrested him. And it was 1 hour after I put an FOI request at the Police Department Records Division. Now, was that a coincidence? I don't think so. But more disturbing is a report I picked up on that very day where there was a burglary at Sherry Cantor's house that nobody knows about. And the reason why probably nobody knows about it is we had an international theft ring in our town Everybody look up SATG. These are some bad people. It took the West Hartford Police Department to utilize and collaborate with 5 Connecticut police departments, 5 New York police departments, the FBI, ICE, Homeland Security, and U.S. Immigration and Customs to make one arrest. And nobody's talking about it. How can we do that? How are we in this town where we don't know what's going on? And when you hold these people accountable or try to or attempt to, you get all kinds of responses. Lorna, you're a good example where it's a non-response. I'll email you, you're going on behalf of everybody else, but you never get back. Or you'll get Dallas Dodge, the town attorney, with his intimidating language. He likes to use the word private and privacy a lot when it's regarding public safety. Or you could get a raging Mary Sherry Cantor like I did on my personal phone saying, what was I trying to do? Well, Sherry, what are you trying to do by hiding what happened there? She was questioning why I wanted a statement from the PD on the burglary at her home. This is some serious stuff. And more disturbing was I held Mary Fay accountable for her dropping the ball. She promised she would help me out with the Bristow incident. Promised me. I called her out on it. This is what she texted me. It's on my phone. Get a effing life. You are effed up. Stay on your meds. When I put a complaint in to the ethics board for the city council, guess who sits on it? Anybody want to guess? It's Mary Fay. She shouldn't even be sitting up here ever again with this text. I've sent it to everybody, and everybody ignores it. I had a town council member tell me to get a life. And think about this. That poor girl obviously had some mental health issues.
Your time has expired.
Okay.
Next, we have Liz Tracy.
Hi, my name is Liz Tracy. I'm a resident of West Hartford. For 2.5 years, I was the Conard girls soccer head coach. I'm speaking today on Policy 4500, Evaluation, Termination, and Non-Renewal of Athletic Coaches. I'm here to make you aware that the evaluation piece of this policy is not being followed, to request the policy become more specific regarding how issues are escalated and handled before non-renewal, and to encourage you to expand the appeals process. Per Policy 4500 and by state law, athletic coaches should be evaluated on an annual basis and provided with a copy of that evaluation. I have never received a written evaluation from the athletics department, and I don't believe I'm an outlier in that regard. I was removed as a head coach because of 2 evaluation methods that I did not participate in, let alone receive a copy of. First, the administration said they received a complaint via email from a parent. This evaluation did not include an investigation of myself, my coaching staff, or my captains. The decision for my non-renewal was made even though I'd never received a written evaluation, wasn't given the chance for a conversation to defend myself, nor received any mentorship. Foregoing an investigation is not an evaluation. We need Policy 4500 updated to ensure a process of investigation, escalation, and resolution. 2, there are optional anonymous surveys sent to players and parents at the conclusion of every season, which coaches are told repeatedly will never be used against us, only to help us improve. A few comments from the surveys were shared with me verbally months before my non-renewal, in a meeting that concluded with the athletic director telling me that I was a great coach he didn't need to worry about. There was nothing egregious or headline-worthy to warrant my non-renewal. In fact, I was coaching a spring sport at Conard at the time and was told this had no bearing on that position. Once shared with me, my survey scores were roughly 50-50 from those who chose to respond. The administration couldn't tell me if 50-50 is average, better, or worse, or if 50-50 was so egregious in comparison to all coaches in West Hartford that a second-year coach with no blemishes, remedial behaviors, or written concerns can be let go. I would like to see 4500 amended so that parent correspondence alone is not a form of evaluation. Coaches are told that surveys are punitive. If 50-50 is a statistical outcome that mandates non-renewal by the 4500 process, all coaches, male and female, first year, 10th year, teachers or non-teachers, should be made aware of that. Using surveys incorrectly makes 4500 a tool for favoritism. I'm asking you to amend 4500 to include an evaluation of the athletic department. Your coaches should have the ability to use the same anonymous tool upward as well. Allow all coaches an opportunity for an appeal. One parent claimed their daughter was uncomfortable playing in my program, but there was no process followed to investigate this. A few negative comments were in the surveys. Coaches are either being misled regarding the power of the surveys, or the athletics department is being run by the loudest parents. Neither of these scenarios are acceptable, and this is why a published process under 4500 is necessary. A multi-page document with the full timeline of events regarding my story have been emailed to the superintendent and the chair of the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Anita.
Hello, my name is Anita, and on the first meeting,
Anita, pardon me. If you could say your last name and your town of residence, please.
Okay, sorry. Everyone knows me by now. Anita Rakelian, West Hartford. So I start from the beginning, right? So I just want to let you know that on September 19th, we did go to a hearing. It's a Freedom of Information hearing. The finance director, and I see she's here, attended as well. Unfortunately, the hearing officer did not have all the paperwork available at the time, so we've asked for a continuance, in which we will have a continuance. But I would like the board to know that as of since January 23rd, when we presented this FOIA, we have not received the records. If there's an end-of-year report, that becomes very, I don't know how to say it, but how do you have an end-of-year report if you can't even produce records? These are very current records that we're asking to look for, that they are allowed for the public to look at, and the Director of Finance is delaying in producing those records. So again, I repeat, you have to consider, if an end-of-year report is provided without those records being disclosed, then how can you substantiate the numbers? With that, I say thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Addie.
Addie Lorden, West Hartford. After the first meeting in September, Superintendent Facinis asked me if I had listened to Assistant Superintendent Morrow regarding the aircon, which is a huge concern for our children and their health and safety. I had, and I have listened to it several times since. When asked by Ms. Kamauf if projects were delayed, Mr. Morrow in part answered, yes, but nothing critical. Aircon has been delayed for 3 summers. As a parent of a child who was born 3 months premature, breathing is critical. I consider it critical. I'm sure most parents consider it critical that our children have a safe environment in which they can learn, in which they can breathe. When asked by Ms. Nasrallah about the aircon in schools, Mr. Morrow stated, air conditioning now there, Claire, referring to Duffy. There's no air conditioning in Duffy, except for window units, which have been paid for by teachers and parents. There is no aircon, except in principal's office that have been refurbished, certain areas of schools, and in Charter Oak that's newly built, and Smith, I believe. Nowhere can I find the $4 million referred to by Mr. Morrow. Only the $2.5 million added to the $8,228,000 CIP back in 2020. Connecticut received $1.7 billion in COVID aid. Most of it went to school districts. $128 million was spent on air quality improvements. Where's the WHPS and West Hartford accounting for their portion of that $128 million? Act 22118 grants for HVAC. This is in Connecticut. Millions of dollars. Where's the accounting on the portion that WHPS has applied for? Where is that money? Has WHPS applied for the fiscal year 2024? The deadline is in December. We have been waiting years and years for aircon in our schools. Apparently, clean air is not conducive with learning. I think it is. Back in 2020, this Board of Education, not you in particular, but the Board of Education approved $2.5 million in the first year, $2.575 million the next year, $75,000 to $100,000 each year thereafter to supply aircon to 2 schools per year and cover it in 10 years. Nothing has been done at all. Where's the money? Where's the aircon? Where's the windows? Where's the timeline? When will the bid go out? Evasive answers, non-transparency. Each of you sit in those chairs. You have a responsibility to our children that they have an excellent education, but also in a safe and healthy environment. You have no plan.
Your time has expired. Thank you. Next, we have Kali Alston Griffin. I apologize if I mispronounced the name.
My name is Kalia Alston Griffin. I'm a West Hartford resident. I'm speaking on behalf of WASCO. West Hartford African American Social and Cultural Organization denounces the use of racial slurs by faculty, teachers, administrators, or staff within the school system, town government, or administration that is not based on sound pedagogy produced by academic experts and have researched and published rigorous academic works regarding these words and their use. These words are complicated. They have various meanings and effects and are often hurtful and in many cases traumatizing. WASCO would like to commend the early response of the West Hartford Board of Education and the West Hartford Public Schools for responding in a timely and transparent manner to the recent accusations that a teacher used a racial slur in a West Hartford public school classroom. Each appropriately issued public statements to reiterate the standard of inclusion, equity, and emotional safety of our students, faculty, administrators, and staff. They have advised that an investigation has been launched. The members of WASCO understand the challenges of an investigation into this matter. There are several considerations, including policies, individual rights, precedents, collective bargaining agreements, and associated processes. Our members accept that these investigations take time. Nevertheless, we emphasize that a swift and transparent investigation is necessary for all that have been affected, in particular, the students and families that anxiously wait confirmation and clarity that the town of West Hartford and its schools maintain the highest standards of inclusion, equity, respect, safety, and support for our students and community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Leslie Hammond.
Leslie Hammond, Hammond Realty from Hartford. Thank you so much for having this public comment. I really appreciate that. And I love hearing from the public too. So I'm here to stand up for Lamora Hardy and her son, Kenji. I've known Lamora for at least 15 years. She's a family friend. And I've tried to walk with her through this whole incident and be an ally for the last 3 weeks. I'm a realtor and I've sold a lot of houses in West Hartford. And I have to say, most of my clients always are really happy West Hartford's so diverse. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's more diverse than most of Connecticut, which is very segregated. We all know that. But now that I'm looking under the hood, so to speak, I'm really upset at what I'm finding. I feel that in 2020, the town made the statement that racism is a public health hazard. And since then, I think you have a DEI person that seems to have a lot of hats, so I don't know how she does what she does. And then recently just hired a new equity person. I don't know what any of these people are doing. I understand when there's an investigation, we all know that when it's legal, that certain people, including the board, probably cannot reach out to Lamora. But nobody has reached out to her from the very beginning. The superintendent did in the last week or so, but right from the very beginning, that first day, there should have been some sort of advocate, social worker, somebody that should have checked in with her and then checked in every couple days. It's been incredibly isolating, really lonely, and scary because she's been getting hate email. She went to a parents' meeting at her school, hoping to find out more from the teachers about Kenji. in a positive way. And the principal brought up the incident, and of course she was the only Black woman in the room, I presume the only Black person. So all eyes were on her. So she just left. And then after that, she got hate email through her webpage. She went to make a police report. Took her an hour and 40 minutes sitting in the police station. Now we all know, I know this is a progressive town. We all know what Black people are going through with police. To sit an hour and 40 minutes and be ignored is unacceptable. And if she had some sort of advocate or social worker or anybody that could have checked in with her, it wouldn't have been so difficult. So this has just been really, really hard. Whatever happens with this investigation, I hope this teacher is fired, but I know it has to play out a certain way. I pray that you use this as an opportunity to really have some, not a DEI person that has too many hats, somebody that can really be an ally for some of these parents of color that can go through some really painful, scary times and very isolating. I had thought that your schools were a lot more diverse. I had no idea that some of them are just not that diverse. And it's really hard. Anybody that's a person of color knows it's really hard to be one or two people in the room that are non-white.
Excuse me, your time is expired.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all that we have listed here. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on a non-agenda item? I'll ask once again. Okay, we will pause. We will pause on public communications. Now moving on to non-staff communications and reports. This is when we're able to hear from our student representatives what is going on in town. So let us first begin with Chris reporting on Conard.
So Conard, we just wrapped up our student council elections this week, and the new members were elected to the student council. We had a breakfast for the students who won national merit, and all the 24 students who had won merit went to that breakfast. They were celebrated by the administration. The PSAT is this Thursday, and seniors don't have to come until 10:45, and the underclassmen will be taking the examination in that time period. And there will be a celebration of Latin American and Hispanic foods made by the foods classes, and I believe the Hispanic Heritage Club as well, called Cocinando, I believe.
All right, thank you, Chris. Liam reporting on Hall.
With the recent AP score data from the examination that occurred in May, Hall has won the AP Gold Award and the AP Access Award. The Access Award shows our dedication to equitable access to AP courses. Also, our first Black Box show, The House of Blue Leaves, will be opening very soon. As well as Conard, our PSAT prep is going on for Thursday. 9th and 10th graders will be taking it, and 11th graders are encouraged. And Wi-Fi has been tested in many of the rooms to ensure that things will run smoothly. Also, meetings for winter sports are beginning for things like girls basketball and many others. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Liam. Again, thank you both for your updates. Now moving on to unfinished business, which we do not have any of, and now on to new business, where we have a motion by Lorna Thomas-Farquharson, Gayle Harris, and Renée Kamauf to accept revised and new policies and a revised bylaw, and this is the first reading. The recommendation is that the Board of Education accept as a first reading the following revised and new policies and bylaws, which were reviewed by the Board Policy Subcommittee: Community Relations, Series 1000, 1240, referring to visitors and observations in the schools; 1250, use of school facilities, formerly 4020, Prohibition Against Smoking. A new one, school volunteers, student interns, and other non-employees, referring to students, Series 5000, 5500, high school graduation requirements, and 5720, search and seizure. Is there a motion to accept these as the first reading?
So moved.
Thank you, Ari. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Renee. Discussion. Thank you so much, Dr. Murrow. Passing to you.
As you mentioned, this is a first read. This is the continuation of the work that you began 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, to update the policy book to make sure that we are in legal compliance, and I'm available to answer any questions that your committee might have.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions regarding the policies before us? Again, this is the first reading. We do not vote until the second reading. Yes, Ethan.
So just a question. I can see what's been eliminated and what's been added. Is this just verbiage, or is this changing something meaningful?
There's really no meaningful change to any of this. This is just updating us with compliance with Shipman's latest version of the policies.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I may thank you for that question, Ethan, we're very appreciative to Shipman for what they're doing. As we know, our board policy binder is quite thick, several inches thick, filled with many policies, and they have taken upon themselves to go through each and every policy to ensure that we are compliant with state statutes and regulations. And so this certainly is following through to ensure we are doing so. Any other questions or comments? Claire.
So the new policy on school volunteers, is that something that's been issued by the state across to all Board of Eds?
This is a policy that provides guidance and really a legal guidance, both to put us in compliance with the state statutes around that, but also to be consistent with the other schools. Probably about 70% of the school districts in Connecticut follow the Shipman policy book, and the rest follow CABE. And so these are simply the Shipman policies. They're consistent with CABE except for different language here and there, but the backbone of it is the same, and it's to put us in legal compliance.
Okay, and then down the page it says volunteers may be required to submit state and federal criminal record checks.
Yeah.
Is that commonly asked?
That's consistent with our current practice, Claire. What we normally do is it depends upon the level of student contact that a volunteer is going to do. If a volunteer is coming into a third grade classroom to read a story, then we don't do a background check or fingerprinting or a background check on that volunteer. We don't, in essence, clear them as we would with a staff member. Because that's just a one-time thing. If a volunteer is going to be going on a field trip that might be out of town or even in town, and is going to perhaps have a group of students assigned to them for supervision, so they may or may not at times be with one of our staff members, then we will require an increased level of clearance on that. We just want to make sure that the people working with our students are safe.
Other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, we'll pause, and thank you so much, Dr. Murrow, for the first reading of these policies. Now moving on to staff communications and reports and passing it to our superintendent, Mr. Vicinis.
Thank you very much. And again, pleasure to be able to provide the board with an update. I'm excited that we're into October and schools are really gaining momentum with their job of really teaching and learning. So it does feel a little bit more normal than it has, I would say, in the last several years. We are, as I think you heard in some of the student reports, still in the celebration of National Hispanic Heritage Month. So as Chris shared, there are events going on at Conard. At King Philip Middle Schools, the students are participating in grade level mini parades where during their lunch periods they showcase cultural flags, traditional dress, and music. And across all of our schools, there are a combination of lessons or celebratory type events. And as I believe we've shared in the past, there's additional information on our website should families choose to want to explore a little deeper and celebrate at home. I am excited to share that West Hartford, I believe I shared in the summer that we had applied. We've recently been accepted to the Connecticut State Department of Education Dual Enrollment Expansion Grant. And the purpose of this grant is to expand opportunities for our high school students to participate in rigorous coursework that relates with early college experience. Generally, our partner with the early college experience, our biggest partner is the University of Connecticut. We have a host of what are called ECE offerings, early college experience offerings, and through this grant, we will provide staff training, we will provide curriculum development in order to expand those opportunities with a specific emphasis in areas of the arts, music, visual arts, physical education, as well as computer science. In addition, I'm excited to share that the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving has recently awarded the West Hartford Public Schools with a $10,000 grant to benefit King Philip Middle School in honor specifically of Principal Joy Wright. The mission of the foundation is to put philanthropy into action and to create lasting solutions that create vibrant communities. So we're very excited for Joy and very excited for the King Philip community and certainly very have a lot of gratitude for the Hartford Foundation. A couple of staffing announcements. I did want to share, I think I announced previously, maybe in writing, but not here at the board table, that we have a new 6 through 12 school counseling department supervisor, Ms. Patricia Pyers, who was previously a school counseling chair at the Berlin Public Schools. She's recently been released on hold from Berlin and has started. And I'm equally pleased to announce that we have a new 612 science supervisor, Dr. Allison Lucas, who was previously the science chair at Stratford Public Schools, and she will have her first day with us later this month. The district was very pleased to welcome Connecticut State Attorney General William Tong, who visited West Hartford's adult education program earlier this week to share his story with Advanced English as a Second Language Learning Adult Learner class. As you may know, Attorney General emigrated from China and grew up here in West Hartford, and his message was one of opportunity and the value of education. And lastly, a couple of celebrations. A third grade Charter Oak teacher, Nora Brown, participated as a panelist in a roundtable professional learning event facilitated by Sue O'Connell, who's an author of Math in Practice, which is a significant resource out there that's popular, trending nationally. And she was highlighted regarding the use of diverse math literature to support student learning of mathematics. So we're very proud of Nora. I believe I heard Liam mention it, but it was both Conard and Hall that were recently announced as gold medal recipients in the College Board's Advanced Placement School Honor Roll program. This program reviews and recognizes schools based on a variety of factors, including college readiness and achievement on college and career examinations. So that is my report, and pending your questions, turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. Questions in response to what we have received, or comments? Right. Well, thank you so very much. Good news. All right. Moving on now.
Lorna?
Yes, pardon.
I had wanted to propose something on new business, but you moved faster than I could go. Can I do that now, or? I realize we went past it, but
What I may suggest when we get to agenda items.
that's fine.
Thank you. Moving on to staff reports and board discussions, we now will receive state assessment results referring to literacy, mathematics, and science. And this information will be presented to us by Ms. Ann McKernan, Dr. Carrie Jones, and Mrs. Eileen Eustace. I apologize if I, okay, all right.
Well, as the team gets settled, I'll just share with the board. This is one of our annual reports where we highlight our performance on our state assessments. There are mandatory assessments for all students in grades 3 through 8 in literacy and mathematics, and then again in grades 5, 8, and 11 in science. And we are in our second year coming out of the pandemic, where we have a return to, I would say, to our typical testing platform. All of the testing takes place online and is untimed. The testing itself, use the wrong word, in terms of how it is adaptive to the children's performance as they progress through it. So I'm just trying to filibuster a little bit as they're waiting for their visuals to come up.
Well, those who are with us here and those who may be viewing, we have been through this before. We know we have moments when we are spontaneously provided an opportunity to practice our patience. And to adapt.
Oh, no, I have it here. Yeah.
This is learning nonetheless. We know we have crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence, and this is tapping into the fluid intelligence, responding to novel situations, thinking in the moment. So go team, excellent. So, Liam, I don't want to put you on the spot, but may I ask, because we are here for our young people, and we're so honored to have you represent Hall and students. So, may I ask, with us being what, about 4 weeks now into the school year, what is it like?
So far, it has been really wonderful. I mean, for me specifically, my brother has just started his freshman year, so it's been a great adjustment for him, and it's great to have that insight to see what it's like for that freshman experience, especially since I was a part of the class that had the online orientation. Additionally, it's been great to settle into my many classes and coursework to learn my varying interests. So yes, I've had a wonderful time so far.
You know, I'm glad you said that. That's right. You started your freshman year during the pandemic. Virtual learning, wow.
Yes.
And here you are, a graduating senior, in person, full time. Wow.
Yes, it's been quite the growth moment, especially since I was a member of the online high school during my freshman year, so there was definitely some difficulty transitioning into myself. But we've moved past it, and now I'm here.
You moved past it. Excellent. And what helped you move past it?
Definitely a combination of being a member of the track and field team. I feel like I was able to befriend many people and grow a lot in many different ways. Additionally, with the support of just other friends and peers throughout the classroom, and then also teachers as well.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're proud of you. Very proud of you. Any words of advice for current freshmen?
Stick with it. It may seem a little bit difficult or a difficult adjustment at first, but it does get a lot more better and a lot more enjoyable.
Excellent. Wonderful words of advice. And thank you for rolling with it, being put on the spot in the moment. Excellent.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my apologies. Unfortunately, last time I presented, we were able to show it there, and it came here, and the magic of technology worked. And tonight, not so. So my colleague Carrie Jones has gone to make you some old-fashioned hard copies, and you do have our report. So I will start, and then when Carrie comes, you'll get some even more lovely visuals. So just a minute. So it's good to be here tonight with all of you, and I have Eileen Eustace with us, and Eileen is our Director of Secondary Education, and Dr. Carrie Jones, who will be with us shortly. So tonight we are here to present the State Assessment Report for 2022-23, and this will review the results of the Smarter Balanced Assessment that is given in grades 3 through 8 in literacy and math. The 8th time we've given the Smarter Balanced Assessment. We'll also review the Next Generation Science Assessment, which is given in grades 5, 8, and 11, and this is the 4th time we have results. The first administration was back in 2014-15 for Smarter Balanced, and that actually is not a benchmark we use because the state actually made a change in it the very next year. So we take the next year and we think of that as our first year. The Next Generation Science Standard Assessment was redesigned after several years, and it was administered for the first time in 2018-19. So that's just a little setup for our presentation tonight. I'd like to just go over the agenda tonight. We'll talk about the timeline when we administer these assessments to students, when we get reports, and then how we communicate them to the parents and, of course, to all of you, and how we use them with our staff to make improvements, which we use quite a bit. In the spring of last year, we administered the assessment, usually right after April vacation. We start the assessment. We find that's a good time. We can start as early as March, but there's really no rush. The first one done doesn't win necessarily, so there's no real rush to start. We find that if we start right after April vacation, we can usually administer, and it's a big administration, over 4,000 tests, as you can imagine. In middle school, for instance, everyone in the building is testing. In the elementary schools, grade 3 through 5 are testing, and then at the high school, grade 11 is testing. So it's a pretty big lift. In the summer, we start getting preliminary results from the state of Connecticut, and we can start reviewing them as early as July, usually. Even in June, we're starting to get some assessments back. In the fall, usually the state is finalizing those, and we get individual score reports that we actually, Eileen's office does a fabulous job. My old office and Paul before me, we will get boxes and boxes of individual test reports that get mailed home. You might remember getting some for your own. I see some heads nodding. Maybe you had children where you'll get these individual reports. So the individual reports are exactly as they say. You'll get one for the Smarter Balanced, and you will get, which will have literacy and math in one report, and then science, you'll have another report if you're a parent. It's a separate piece of paper. The state will give you a report that will show you your child's scale score. So that is a score that's based on what you would think of the actual test score, the unit score. And because it's an adaptive test, they have to, adaptive meaning when you get a question correct, you might get a harder next question. If you don't get that question correct, you might have a slightly easier next question. So the students don't get exactly the same questions all the time. So they have a process where they can use to take into account all of those different parameters and put that score on a scale. So you'll get a scale score for your child, and also the children are then put into 4 bands depending on the scale score. So the highest band is called level 4, and it is labeled as exceeds the achievement standard for that grade. So that generally means above grade level standard, at or above. The level 3 band is a band called meets the achievement standard. So if your children are scoring in this meets band, you can pretty much assure they are at grade level. The level 2 is a group of a scale band which indicates a student's performance is approaching the standard but not quite there, so it might be just a little bit below grade level. And students who have a level 1 band does not meet this standard at that point. So they are more than 1 grade below level. The report also includes what we would call subscores. So in reading, in literacy, there's a subscore for reading, for listening, and then writing and research. In mathematics, there's subscores for concepts and procedures, problem solving, and communicating reasoning. So you will get the overall scale score and the level. Then you will also see subscores. And then if your child is in grade 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, you will also have a 2-year growth measure to see how much did they grow from the year before. Science is set up very similarly. The same levels, scale score and reporting levels are the same. The only difference is you will not, and they have subscores as well. Their subscores are practices and concepts in earth science, practices and concepts in life science, and practices and concepts in physical science. What you won't have in the science score is a growth score because they took one in 5, in 8, and in 11. So you won't see a growth because it's not given every year. And now that you have your lovely report, let me take a moment to let you pass it out and you can go along with me. And I'm getting more audience members. Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, so we are currently looking at the state reporting for science. Please just nod if you are on that page. I want to make sure I don't go too fast or too slow. Okay. Nodding along. Okay, great. So now it's time to look at what our achievement results were for last year after that lead in. So last year in literacy, the district had 64.2% of the students at at levels 3 and 4. So that is at grade level or higher. In mathematics, that number was 59.4%, or the percentage was 59.4 for mathematics. And I can tell you overall, since the pandemic, and we're really looking at the effect of the pandemic it's had on learning and how our recovery is since the pandemic. So overall, between both assessments, we've recovered 95% of the loss prior to. So what we look at is, we look at the 4 years before, 2000 up to 2019, we average those, and we look at the 2 years post, and we say how much of that recovery, because we'd love to recover all of it at once, but unfortunately it is a process. And overall, we've recovered 95% of that. So last year's results in last year's results when you combine ELA and math are a little bit of a dip from the previous year, about 2.3%. If you separate them into literacy and math, you actually see math actually had a gain of over 1.3% last year. So math had a slight improvement last year, and ELA a slight drop. Overall, when we look at the recovery, literacy has recovered about 93% of where they were prior to pandemic, and math has recovered just over 97% of where they were. And we look at that 2000. That 4-year band before as a real good marker of how to get back to over the interruptions that we experienced. Let's see. In math, there's another good news story I wanted to share, that 3 of the 6 tested grades have recovered all of their losses, which is really nice to see that. In some grades, we have recovered all, and in fact, I believe one grade we've recovered more than all. So there are really good signs out there that we're on the right track. We need to keep working at it and keep refining and keep working with the students on just the good study skills and commitment skills it takes to perform at grade level. I want to remind everyone, we're steeped in this every day, but these are rigorous benchmarks. And, Paul's done this report many, many times. If you're meeting all these benchmarks along the way, you should be very ready for your freshman year in college, which is really what it's set for, college and career readiness, and it's important to remember that. So I'm encouraged to see certain really good signs, and even in reading, we are getting close to 100% recovery in 2 of the grades in literacy. So there are good signs. Another way that we look at our student assessment results is not just the overall achievement, but how much did students grow. So I'm going to ask you to go to the next slide called Student Growth Results. And here the state has what we call growth targets. So you can imagine every child actually has an individual growth target based on their performance the previous year. So students who are scoring a little below grade level have a slightly more rigorous target for growth, because of course we want to close that gap over the years so that they are ready for college and career when they get to that point. And students who are scoring at the higher bands, the highest bands, their target is a little lower because it's hard to maintain at that level as the content gets much harder. So when we look across that, the students, that ranges from 0 to 110. And the students can achieve, because you can certainly even exceed your target, right? So if I was supposed to get 50 points of growth and I get 60, I've actually exceeded my target, and I get credit for that up to 110. So each student has an individual percent of the target that they have achieved. And we aggregate all of that to say, well, what percentage did the district achieve? So I can tell you that in literacy, the district achieved 60.4% of the target growth, and in mathematics, 68.7. And I'll point in another bright spot. The mathematics achievement at 68.7 is the highest ever before pandemic. After pandemic, it's just the highest ever of growth, which is really encouraging to us that although we're not all the way back there, we're seeing really solid growth there. That we continue to look at the factors of what is going into that growth so that we can replicate that in all of the areas that are so important to us. Okay, moving on. We also, at times, will compare how we're doing to the state and to our DIRG. We are in, the state has used, for years, they used something called the District Reference Group, which puts similar towns together. They don't actually use this target currently, but we have maintained this as a good comparison level for us because many of the towns in DIRG B are towns that are like West Hartford in many ways, and parents might think of moving there, or buying a house there, renting a home there. So we like to look at how we're doing compared to other towns that might draw our parents to them. And DIRG B is like us in many ways, but in some important ways that I'll point out, they're very different as well. So as we compare our work to both the DIRG and the state, we certainly are well above all of the state measures for both mathematics and for literacy, and we're following a similar trend that literacy has been the harder area to see the gains back. And we're trying to really understand why that is. Why has math been, not only for us, but for the DIRG and for the state, of the two where we're seeing more, thank you so much, Carrie, we're seeing so much more progress. So that is not a West Hartford trend, it's actually a state and a trend in the DIRG. One of the things I always want, and I think Paul always pointed out to you when he was giving this report, a very different way West Hartford differs from our DIRG in one very important way, and that is the way the state measures socioeconomic status through the free and reduced price lunch program participation. So the average percent of students in DIRG B in their towns, their average percent of students applying for and receiving free and reduced price lunch is 14%. In West Hartford, it's close to 27%. And as you may know from all of your studies of education and teaching and learning, that factor is really negatively correlated to performance, which is unfortunate, but a very clear trend throughout Connecticut, but throughout the country. It is a struggle for students in lower socioeconomic groups to have higher performance. It's not impossible, but of course it is a struggle. So we do look at that factor quite a bit. West Hartford's 27% free and reduced lunch, and DIRG B towns average at 14%, so nearly double. And yet our performance is not dramatically different from many of the towns. Moving on. I lost my place. Sorry. No, I'm good. Okay. We also like to look at our performance of our high needs students, and I want to remind you, I know you have so much to remember when you're sitting on the Board of Education, who is in the high needs group, and we have new members at times, so I'll just remind you, our high needs student group is made up of students who are English language learners, have special education identification, or, and this is an or, this isn't an and, or are on free and reduced lunch program. So that's an or. So this is a group of students who can fall into any of those categories or more than one of those categories. So we always keep our eye on our free and reduced, our high needs students and what their performance is, because this is a group that has greater struggles to learn and to achieve and to demonstrate their learning. So our performance has generally been about a little over a 20 percentage gap when you look at the non-high needs students in comparison to the high needs students. This is, I've included a graph of their performance, and last year in literacy, a greater percentage, the high needs group is still at about the same level of gap that we've had prior to pandemic. It has been a persistent gap. It is a very difficult gap to close. We have seen some narrowing of that. For instance, there was a narrowing of about 3% in literacy this year and about 1% in math this year. So a small narrowing, but it is unfortunately a persistent gap that we actually talk about literally daily in our work of what are the strategies to best teach and have those students learn the content, what are the engagement strategies, what are the curriculum changes, what are the instructional changes, what kind of assessment changes can we implement to affect change with this group. And I can tell you everyone sitting here has worked on this problem. We continue to. We do see some bright spots. Sometimes we see narrowings of the gap that we want to just continue to work. The pandemic has hit this group harder, unfortunately, than the non-high needs students. More challenges, and it has hit them a little bit harder. So we're actually not discouraged by the fact that we are seeing a slight narrowing despite the fact that the pandemic has hit this group harder. One other really nice point I saw in the data, which was interesting, is our special education students as a subgroup of this subgroup, very interesting, have actually been pretty resilient during this. In literacy, a greater percentage of special education students scored at goal or higher than before. They hadn't seen a real downturn during it. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but that was encouraging. And similarly in math, they are showing a slightly stronger performance than before the pandemic. Very interesting. Now their performance still has a long way to go in many ways, but I'm glad to see that metric. And as we were working on the report in the last few weeks, we also noticed, and Paul, I got to credit Paul with this, he was looking at how our ELL students were doing, and what he is finding is we are seeing so much stronger performance when we've had the children for 3 and more years, that their growth is definitely much stronger. It's harder for us to make the impact when the students have been here less than that, but we are seeing good, strong performance when they have been here when we've had 3 years to work with them.
I'm just going to piggyback on that for a second. I don't mean to interrupt you, Ann, but when we're talking about performance gaps among the high needs group, and you're talking about students learning the English language being tested on the English language at grade level, and when you're talking about students with disabilities being tested in these content areas on grade level, you're not necessarily going to see a one-year solution for any individual student. It is the question, language acquisition takes a number of years for English language learners, and some of the compensatory strategies for students with disabilities take a number of years for them to be able to master the grade level content. So the achievement data and the gap that you see with this group, there is an explanation for its persistence. Our goal is to try to shrink the size of that gap, but when we look at our high needs group, one of the key metrics that we're looking at is growth over time for this population. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Paul. That is, that really puts it into perspective when you think about a student new to our town, maybe new to our country, who is just learning English to take this assessment. And some people might wonder, well, what if the child came in mid-year, like December or January? Do they sit for this test, or do they take a year off first? And the answer is they sit for the test immediately. So they could come in April 1st and be sitting for that test on if we give it on April 15th or something. So that is just something interesting. You may not know that, but that's an interesting aspect of this state testing system. So moving on, we also look at our data in other measures as well, and one of the areas is certainly by race and ethnicity, because we know that there are gaps in race and ethnicity as well. So in the way we look at our students is in our students of color, our African American and Hispanic students, our Asian students, we have our white students, and all students. And what we have traditionally done, in line with what the state does, is we compare these groups to the all group. It's important to know. So looking ahead, we have seen a similar impact for the pandemic. As you look across these many bars, you can see a similar trend. In literacy, all groups have slightly fallen off, and the gaps there have then relatively remained the same. Slight variations, but the trend is the same. And similarly in mathematics, you see a slight uptick in this last bar for 2022-23 in almost every group. So the groups are following the same trend as the overall is, in that in last year there was roughly a 20-point gap between the students of color group and the all group. In literacy, the 4-year pre-pandemic average between students of color and all was 21.2. Last year was around 20. In mathematics, there was a little bit of narrowing the gap down to about 21%. From pre-pandemic was about 23%. So this is another persistent problem that we work on, because it has been in that 20% range for a number of years, and it, like the high needs group, it's another area we watch closely, have we worked on over the years through a variety of strategies, and we will continue to work on. Moving on to our science results. The science, as I said in the opening, we test the students in an assessment called the Next Generation Science Assessment. These are based on new standards that came out in 2018, or just before that actually. The first assessment year was 2018-19. These standards are, again, rigorous, very rigorous standards, and what we have seen this year is that our grade 5 students have had a nice rebound from a little bit of a drop, and our grade 8 has struggled more. Our middle school has struggled more, and our 11th graders have had a very strong rebound as well. One of the things that was interesting to me as I looked at the data was that in the literacy, for instance, we are seeing stronger rebound in the elementary levels than in the middle school levels. And here in science, it's similar too. The math, not so much. The math has been more in line with the general rebound. But we're seeing a slightly longer road to recovery in literacy in the middle school, and a slightly longer road to recovery in the 8th grade science. One real highlight that I didn't include in your written report, I have it in the PowerPoint, but you can't see it, is our 11th grade results were really interesting, because I looked at them, I saw, wow, that's a really good rebound, those are strong results. So I did a comparison, I did a deeper dive on the comparison to the DIRG and the state. And West Hartford doesn't normally lead the DIRG average because we have so much more students with need. But actually, this year's science result, we well exceeded the DIRG average, and the state average we almost always exceed by 17, 18 points. But the DIRG average we actually exceeded, and that's quite an accomplishment. So it was one of the highlights of the report that I wanted to share with you tonight. I'm sorry you can't see the nice chart I made for it. So our takeaways really are that as we think about our takeaways, the state is struggling, and the DIRG is struggling to recover, and so is West Hartford in literacy. Recovery rates in grades 3 through 5 are coming back quicker than in grades 6 through 8. In math, our recovery at 97% is outpacing the DIRG and the state, which is nice to see that not only are we on our way back, we're on our way back a little bit faster than the state is and that the DIRG is. You know, when a few years ago, and I can't remember the year, Paul can probably remember, I think it was around 2016-17, we named math as a focus area, and we put a lot of extra focus on math, and we've really seen the results. That was in the form of some math coaches, and it's good to report to you because you help us to keep these positions. We asked you for some help in math coaches, and we've also had some new mathematics curriculum materials, and we are continually seeing good news there. So we'd like to continue with that work and take our lessons learned in math and apply them in literacy in new ways that we haven't. And then again, our takeaways in science is strong rebound in 5 and 11, a slow rebound in 8, but 11 is really, really a very good news story, because to exceed the DIRG, when you're talking about the towns in DIRG B, which are our neighboring towns like Farmington, Avon, Simsbury, that do have a much lower socioeconomic percentage of students, is a real tribute to the work. So I'd like to stop there and make sure I have time for you guys to ask questions or engage in discussion.
Thank you so very much. Colleagues, questions regarding what's been shared? Yes.
Yeah, I have two questions. One, just wanting to know if the students of color and the students of high need, if there's an intersection there, and just thinking about where they fall on the data metric.
Yes, we actually look at that quite a bit because we can do a lot of comparisons the way we get the data. So we can look at students of color who are not in the high needs group, and their performance, as you can expect, is very strong. It's sometimes the intersection of high needs and students of color is really, it's really a challenge because there's an intersection of a lot of factors there, but the deprivations of poverty is a significant barrier to overcome. Many students also have a special needs issue. So the disaggregation is very important to us, so we can see, we spend a lot of time taking away this factor and looking at that factor, and it's important to us to understand when you're not facing the challenges of low socioeconomic status or special education or ELL, but you're in a students of color group, how that performance compares to all, and it's much favorable, much more favorable.
And I can even
believe
add to
it's
that.
less than half. The gap is less than half.
It's less than half. I can put some numbers to that for you. So it's the intersectionality. When I did a lot of analysis this summer and talked with our principals about, really where our area of emphasis needs to be, and it's within the high needs group. When you disaggregate, whether it's students of color, white students, doesn't matter. We actually had a very positive year, not only in mathematics but also in literacy outside of the high needs group, and our students of color. The gap between all students is really only we're at 5 or 6 points. It's a very modest gap. Within the high needs group, that's really where our need is, and that in large part is due to, when I look at our English language learners, it's been a growing percentage of both Asian and Hispanic students, and again, it's when you look at the English, the English assessments being tested on grade level, if you're coming in new, not to the district, new to the country. And the mandate is you will sit for a state assessment on grade level. It's one of the areas that we've seen that greatest amount of need. So between that and the big thing with CT SEDS, with our special education population, rewriting our IEPs has been to have a greater focus on grade level expectations and providing the scaffolding underneath. So it's not only a West Hartford effort, it's a statewide effort, because there's recognition that it is those populations, and for West Hartford, it's a growing population. I always look at 2018-19. It was our highest year of performance ever on our state assessments. So that's the benchmark that I'm always talking with the leaders about, getting back to that level. And since 2018-19, we've had a 4.5% increase among our students, our high needs population. And at the same time, we've had an 11% decrease in our non-high needs because we've had decreasing enrollment. So we've really become, a destination district based on the services that we provide. We provide a very high level, high quality service, not only for special education, our ESOL population. So we're drawing more families in, and that diversity is wonderful. And we need to just make sure that we can continue to have our programming and our supports match that, so that we can live up to those expectations.
Thank you. One more question.
Yes.
It's around the just some of the different kind of data pockets and how they're broken up from students of color and then Asian. Wondering why those two are separate.
We, Paul can certainly correct me, but we look at the state. We look at the state category. Asian is separate. We can separate Black and Hispanic into their own subgroups if we wanted to. And we made a decision a couple of years ago. I can't remember
So
why.
actually, some of the requests did come from members of the board
Right.
at the time to have Asian be pulled out separately. We will sometimes, the interesting thing about our Hispanic Latinx population is it's a whole separate checkbox from race or ethnicity that it used to be years ago. It stood alone right alongside all the other categories that are a construct made up by the state or federal government. They separated out Hispanic and Latinx years ago, so there's intersectionality among that population and all other categories, which a lot of them get subsumed into two or more. Our Black population is actually fairly small. It's only 10%. So we've combined those just because sometimes when you have a smaller percentage of a population, a small number of students can create what seems like a larger change in the data. So, but at any time, if there's a preference on the board as to how we would report that, if you'd like it all broken out separately, if you'd like it all combined, we're certainly happy to do so. But we do try to follow some of the ways that the state is reported publicly, the data is reported publicly on the state websites.
Right, that is correct. I specifically remember the request for Asian to be pulled out separately, but it can be done. So if there's different ways you'd like to see it, please let us know, and we'll be happy to. We have plenty of it, and we have a lot of ways to disaggregate it. So we're happy to show it any way that's helpful to you.
Thank you.
Yes, Gayle.
So I wanted to go back to what you were talking about a minute ago with the students of color. So what I think was said, but I just want to clarify, is that numbers get pulled down because there's such a high level of students of need in that group, so that the reason that, or potentially the reason that the students of color there's this 20% gap is because there's such a high need population that's being reported in that group. Is that correct?
Not specific to students of color, to really across race or ethnicity. So when you think about English language learners, in the students of color group, that includes our Hispanic population. A significant number of our English language learners are going to be identify as Hispanic Latinx, coming from a wide variety of countries. And then likewise, we have a very significant number of Asian students that are also in the English language learner programs if they're new to the country. So we've disaggregated, and we can look at the performance across race ethnicity separate from English language learner. Like, so once I'm no longer an English language learner, and there's criteria for that with a different state assessment. And there's a very minor gap there. Among our high needs students, just to be clear, it's not that their performance over time is necessarily in decline. It's that we have a greater density in that category. So the gap that we have had persistently in the neighborhood of 20 points carries greater weight as we've had declining enrollments as a district. We have fewer students that are not in that high needs group than 3 or 4 years ago, and we have a greater number of students that are in that high needs group, and yet they are still carrying on a year-over-year basis a persistent gap of about 20 points.
Okay. Can I ask one last thing? The other question I wanted to ask was why we're definitely below our DRG, both in math and in literacy. And then we're also saying, well, the DRG doesn't really, we don't really match up with the DRG because they have a different demographics. So what is the point of the DRG then if you're going to say that, well, we have 100% more of these types of students and they don't? I mean, it kind of makes us look bad, I guess, because we're being compared to the DRG, but then we're saying, well, we shouldn't be compared to the DRG.
I understand what you're saying. It makes sense, right? Even when you're writing it, you're saying, should we still use DRG? I think the only reason is because we're near many of the towns in the DRG. They're Farmington, Avon, Simsbury, Canton, and Granby. They're right here, and some parents just, as I stated, some parents are looking at these different towns and saying, should I move here? Should I move here? Should I rent here, buy here? And it's so we like to know how we're doing against the in comparison to the towns around us. We certainly don't have to. The state does not use DRG any longer. It's been a number of years. So it's really a choice we've made to report only really to you. I actually don't hear us talk about it outside of this report very often. But I like to know this personally just because there are choices and parents might just go another mile out from Hartford and be in. So we like to see how we're comparing. We don't need to do that. It's also, I think I think another way to look at it is it's a really rigorous group of schools. So it keeps us saying, how are we doing against some of the really highest performing schools in the state? And even though we might be a little lower than they are, we are really competing against competing at a very similar level, a little bit lower, but we don't take it as a negative. We take it as a point of like internal comparison to say, for instance, I pointed out the science when I could say, if I didn't study it, I might not know. But studying this science metric in 11th grade and looking at these other 20 towns and our town and saying, wow, in this particular grade, we've actually well exceeded the DERG average in science. It was interesting. So to your point, it's not necessary.
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback. The state actually discourages DERG comparisons, but it's something that we've never shied from. For all the reasons that Ann mentioned. I think it is something that's in the mind of community members at times, and certainly folks. I don't think it's boastful to say that folks typically will move to West Hartford with education as one of their primary reasons. So we're very happy to demonstrate the competitive nature with which we hope to achieve relative to the DERG, knowing that we realistically don't look like the DERG in many different ways. The size, our size as a district, our diversity as a district, our percentages of students with socioeconomic need as a district, all of those different factors differentiate us, and yet, what I would say is that we compare favorably to the performance. 2018-19, or I remember what it was. I'm sure it's on the sheet when you look at the DERG comparison. Our math, the difference between the DERG and our math performance was incremental. It was very, very small. So it is that sort of a point of internal pride and an aspiration that we want to demonstrate that. The strengths of our programs, and we're not unafraid to have comparisons to high performing districts who may be high performing simply based on differences in terms of who they're servicing or their size in general.
Yeah, West Hartford's much bigger than the vast majority of schools in DERG B. So your point is well taken, Gayle. Again, I think the internal comparison for us is important, but it doesn't have to be necessarily shared. Yes.
Just to kind of go off of what Paul was saying, I actually had an exact, my reaction to the comparison was very different than Gayle's, only because if we look at within West Hartford, right, we see this 20 to 30 point gap between our high needs and our non-high needs students. And then when we look at the fact that we have twice as many high need students in our district as the ones that we're comparing against, and yet we are still kind of raising the bar, and we might not exceed the DERG, but we are still in close range, and in some some instances we have actually exceeded the DIRG. I actually think that that speaks to the amazing work that we're doing here in the district for our students.
I would, agree, and that's why we hold ourselves to that standard. We could certainly ignore it and just say, well, let's not compare ourselves to anyone but the state. But I think that wouldn't give you the nuanced answer that we, nuanced impression that we want you to get, And so it takes a group of towns that years ago felt they were similar. I think that over these 20 years that they don't use this anymore are not as similar. There are towns in the DIRG that have 3% students in free and reduced lunch. There's another town that has 9, and we have 28 or 27, excuse me. So, and also I didn't even tell you about ELL, which is a similar situation where we have much more ELL and much more free and reduced lunch, but yet it's like that internal benchmark. You want to go against something that's rigorous and say, well, how are we doing? But I do understand Gayle's point, because state's not using it, so why are you? But internally, I think we want to say, we are with these towns. And there are many times, I think our math this year was higher than a whole group of towns in that DIRG. And when we can say we are doing, we are performing with or slightly better than towns that have much less free and reduced lunch, much less socioeconomic needs, that helps, I think, us, I think it's encouraging, I guess is the best way to put it. So you're both absolutely valid and good points, and we can continue doing it or not. But I know internally I will, and I know Paul will, and I bet Eileen and Carrie will. So we don't have to report it, but we will be looking.
Ethan.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, but first, I hope you stay with the DIRG, because I think it's better to have something to shoot for, and I think if you took it away, then the assumption would be we're using it to make the scores better. So I think it's better to have high objectives and try to reach them. Question for you. That was my paid political speech.
Thank you.
How much, or have you tried to quantify what the benefit of the coaching is?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't have the numbers with you, but before we actually asked you for the coaches in the middle school, Paul had done quite a bit of look, because years before, many of you might not have been on the board, we'd come to you with a question of elementary math coach, and we had looked at not only how many schools they were affecting, because with 11 elementary schools, we weren't adding 11 math coaches. We had to take 1 or 2 and that person can't go between 5 and 6 schools. It would be chaotic. So we had to say, let's strategically place you at 2. Mm-hmm. And so we looked at that approach. We looked at not only their cost, but where they were placed, what their interactions with the teachers were. And it was actually after all of that data that, again, I don't have with me, but I think we could run, that's when we came and asked you for the middle school, because we had actually seen success in the elementary, and I've got to credit Carrie and her team, because she was crucial in helping the math coaches identify what the best practice was. Because you're a teacher, you have a coach come in. I mean, Claire, you're a teacher, right? A coach comes in, you're like, who's this person, and are they my evaluator, and to what extent should I listen to what they're doing? So you come in, it's not like your principal and so we really studied what the elementary did. And I'll give you another example, that comes to mind is one of our elementary schools where we had some scores we were concerned about. We moved the math coach from a building where she had some success to this other elementary school, and we got very good results again last year. And I think it's not just having one, but working closely with that person so that they build trust with the teachers, so they understand the purpose, and so that there's very little time teachers have, Claire can tell you that, when you're free to sit with someone who's going to work with you on an aspect. And every elementary, if you're a math teacher or if you're an elementary teacher, the coaching doesn't go to just some people. It's for every math teacher, let's say, if it's a math coach. So we really looked at what their practice was, what the best practice. So Carrie spent hours and hours going through Aguilera's work on coaching, right?
Yeah.
You want to speak to that?
Yeah. We've looked at lots of different coaching models over time. I mean, you can look at a lot of different people. Jim Knight's out of the Midwest, Elena Aguilar out of California. And so we really haven't said there's one particular model that you're going to use in all cases. The most success we've actually had is in team coaching. So where a team of teachers are working with their principal, their curriculum specialist, and in mathematics, or their reading specialist who's operating as a coach as well, and supporting that team and making sure they're targeting the primary standards that we need to meet and address for all children. Because sometimes in our practice, teaching for 15 years myself, almost 20 actually, you know, you kind of get caught up in practices and pieces of your work that may or may not be really targeted in where it needs to go. So the team coaching has actually had a really great impact. And then what happens is from that relationship, some people move on and say, listen, can we work one-to-one? I've got this one small group I need support with. They may be working a little bit below grade level. They may need a little bit of a stretch and challenge. They might be able to do the math, but their communicating, reasoning might not be solid. You know, in terms of getting that thinking about mathematics out in orally or in writing. So we've had great success with team coaching, and that really moves into individual coaching as teachers need or really the team needs. You know, they may determine, hey, why don't you work with this person on our team now, and then we'll share results. And so there's a lot of great collaborative work, and that's really been the biggest success.
And I would just reiterate, before we came to you to ask you for middle school support, it really was based on, was the elementary model working? Because we certainly wouldn't want to come to you and say, hey, would you consider math coaches for the middle school if we didn't have success in the elementary? So where we've put those math coaches, we've seen the greatest gains in the elementaries. And we, you know, unfortunately, obviously the pandemic disrupted everything, but we're seeing the gains again back in math, and we're close to full recovery there, and I believe we're very much on the right track there.
Last question. Do you use the test results to determine, so like I was looking at this by grades, and particularly I remember the science, the 8th grade was low last year, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So is there certain places where you can identify, here's where we're strong and here's where we're weak statistically?
Yeah, we look at it in, I can tell you, so many different ways. We can look at it by sub-score. So was it a sub-score that actually, was it one area? And what happened with the curriculum in that area? Was it like, let's say, earth science? Maybe, was that a rushed unit? Do we need to look at the unit? We can look at it in many, many different ways. You know, sometimes we've had in the pandemic, you know, we might know that there was an issue, maybe there was a long-term there was a teacher absence or something for a long time. So you want to take all of your factors, and we look at all the things we can look at through the data, but also all the things we can look at that we just know, that we happen to know, because it's a much smaller group of teachers now you're talking about, instead of all of the, like elementary school teachers are so many, but in science it's just, and in one grade, it's just a small group.
Yeah, I was thinking more just it identifies where the weaknesses and where the strengths are.
Yeah, we look at the scale score.
The state or the.
Yeah, we look at how we perform against the state, even the DIRG. We look at how we've performed in the past. We look at the sub-scores to see if there was one particular area that was weaker. And so we will do that. We continue to do that analysis, and as we say, we saw a great rebound in 5 and a really strong rebound in 11, and so we will figure that out.
And then my final question, and I assume you're already doing this, I assume you tracked it by year, because you know, you look at this and it shows a drop off in 12, but maybe that year had dropped off.
Right, and that is another very important way to look at it, and we look at it both ways. I think one of the reasons I'm so excited about that 11th grade data, because it's so near the end of when they're going to college, and it's such strong performance, and it's cumulative from kindergarten all the way up, because they teach science all the way from kindergarten. So I'm really happy to see that high level of performance right near as they approach the college years.
I thought that's what's great about the science.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Claire. Yeah, just I have a few questions for math. Those coaches were budgeted in the hard budget, not the grant budget. They are in the budget?
Elementary is in the general.
It's actually a mix. So we do have some elementary that are in our regular budget. We've utilized funding under Title I, but it's been a staple, and we do have some of our coaches that are also under ESSER. And so when I present the budget this year, we'll talk about
those coaches,
those very specific positions.
Great. And then in science, your 8th graders, their first test, and the test, the NGSS, is cumulative, so it's everything you've learned in science. They took that first test in 5th grade, right in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, in fact, if I actually have to think, they didn't take it, I don't think it.
So that was their
factor.
first test.
Yeah.
These 8th graders are the first time they're seeing
And it's
that
probably,
test.
and I saw that trend when I was looking at the DIRG in the state too, and it's, a factor I didn't give enough credit in the presentation, but that's an important factor.
Right, and that's, it's a big shock. That test is so different from any other kind of test that a kid
Yeah.
sees. It's about thinking. They also missed out on a lot of the hands-on science, the experiments, the learning, and a lot of it is not about facts. It's about how would you solve it given these tools. If you don't have the tools in your home and your computer. So I can understand that they would have a big impact from the pandemic.
That's a great point that I did not highlight enough on and your point also on, it's really a different test. They're presented with real world phenomenon, and, in a lot of assessments you might have a calculation in math or a multiple choice or even a open-ended, but this particular test has a lot of other tools.
Right.
There's simulations inside of the test. There's, what do they call them? Equation editing. You might be looking at a problem instead of just what's the answer? The question might be, what's wrong with this equation? And you have to edit the equation to make it so it's a complex test, and it's not one that is easily replicated. Let's say your teachers are, they're more and more getting used to this type of test, but it's not something that
You can't
it's
teach
not
to
the
it.
typical. It's not the typical stimulus, and it's not the typical response type either. So it's a very different than most tests they're used to. It's a good point. Thank you for saying that.
And I have a couple questions about special ed. Do you know what percentage of our kids are exempt from the SBA? Do not take the test.
There is I'll have to look that up for you, but there's another test. There's the Connecticut alternative assessment.
But this data is not that.
No, that's about, the state is guiding you to 1%. 1%.
It's a 1% threshold for the students who qualify. In years past, I don't have the specific number, we've been slightly above the 1% because we've become a destination district for those very specific services for our significantly cognitively impaired population. So I don't know if we're 1.5 or perhaps 2, but it's a national incidence rate of 1%.
So with your 9,000, there's about 90 that don't take the test? Or
Not
so?
even, because there's about 4,500, there's under 4,500 kids in the tested grades.
Okay.
Right, because remember, K1, 2, and then 12, 9, 10, and 12 don't test. So when you look at who tests, it's about a little under 4,500, and it's about 1% of those.
Okay.
And the state was very clear, if your incident rate went to 2 or 3, they called you and said, this is too many kids, so you have to look at. So you have to be very careful, and it is in that 1% area. It's 1 point something maybe, but it's a very small number.
Okay, and then for your high needs group and special ed, would a student with an OT diagnosis, a PT diagnosis, therapies in those, or speech, be considered a special ed student, where they might just have an IEP to help with an issue that doesn't affect any of their cognition?
Well, we didn't point this out in the construction of the test, but the accommodations that are available on tests these days for students is much wider than what, I don't think when I went to school there was anything called an accommodation. I think you sat and you took the test no matter what. Am I dating myself? But that is how you took a test. And now there are built-in accommodations in the test for all types of things. One of the biggest things, of course, is the test is on time now, and it used to be a time test. Mm-hmm. But there's all types of accommodations, from the size of the print, the masking, the highlighting. There's all types of tools that the children have if they qualify. And we spend a lot of time in our office, particularly from what is written in an IEP, and translating that IEP into what modifications the children need. Do they need larger print? Some children need Braille. We order Braille books, and actually that's a paper and pencil test again for the person who's giving it. Mm-hmm. Or what I should say is we get a book from which it's read, and then the children respond in a Braille, there's a name for the tool they use, embosser, thank you. So there's a variety of accommodations and for the children, and our office spends actually in the older system months entering those to make sure that every child comes to a test and has what they need in that test. If it's translations, if it's, as I said, size of print, if it's masking, if it's all different kinds of things that they can use. So that's a really important process. It's a process that should be made easier. We hope the state has gone to the CT SEDS program, which should hopefully automatically take the accommodations from the child's individual program plan, hopefully automatically put them in the system. Please keep your fingers crossed. If that happens, it will be really helpful for everyone. Our goal is to make sure that when you sit for this high stakes test that everyone's been talking about all year, that you're as comfortable as possible.
Okay. And one final, sorry. The 1.5 year growth that's expected of the high needs population, is that when the parents get the results? Is the growth data on their your test results? I mean, are they shown that they had a year's growth or a year and a half, or is it you have to have a year and a half in order to show?
Let me just change one thing, and maybe I misspoke, so I'll just clarify. It's not every child has a growth target. You might not be a high needs child, but if you performed in a lower band the previous year, you'd have a very high growth target because the state is setting a bar so that you can get back on track. So it's not only for high needs, it's for anyone, no matter where you score. If you're a regular ed student who just happened to have, you know, a weaker skill in this area or an off year the previous year, you would have a higher target to hit. Right. And in the report itself, I'm just looking at the example, and you'll see it in your report as well. It will show you where they were the previous year, and I believe it does show you what their target was and what they actually achieved. It's very small print, but I believe it will show you that. I'll double check that for you, Claire. We see it in our reports as well, and we can look at it, you know, how the children, because you want to see maintenance at the top level. You want to see the kids maintain that, because the test gets much harder every year. So maintaining at band 3 and 4 is already a pretty rigorous. I'm looking at Liam now because he took these tests over and over again. It's a pretty hard benchmark.
So do the parents, I guess, they get the reports. Do you get many calls? Do many parents want more information?
Not a lot, but it might go to the school level too. You know, I would think a lot of parents might be asking the questions at the school level. We've gotten a couple this year. Had a parent who wanted to see a couple past reports, and we were able to pull them down from the state system. Not many, but I don't want to speak for the schools because I don't know how many they might get.
Yeah, most of those calls, if they're coming in, they're directed either to the child's teacher. Parent wants to know, hey, how, you know, generally, what does a parent want to know? How's my child progressing relative to, you know, your assessment of their strengths and needs and relative to their peers, and or to the principal. And it'll be the odd occasion where a call might filter up to central office, probably something a little bit more technical that parents want to understand. How did this growth target get set? Stuff like that.
Carrie's pointing out to me at the very bottom line of on the state reporting for literacy and math, if you look at the sample, the very bottom line, it's very hard to read because we wanted to fit on the page, refers to the scale score range.
And like a target for the student for the future.
Any other questions or comments?
Sorry, I have one more question.
Latoya.
So just thinking about that disparity again, because I can't stop thinking about that disparity, the race and ethnicity disparity. What initiatives are being taken around communicating with their families around that disparity? How to prepare those students, because while I understand that socioeconomic status plays a role, there's more to the story than that. So just want to get an understanding of what are we doing moving forward, because it is a persistent gap.
Yeah. No, it is, and certainly we treat every child as an individual, and those individual conversations with parents are always crucial. And there's a number of things we've done curricularly to have students hopefully connect better with the curriculum changes. I think the individual conferences with parents about not not necessarily the gap, but that their child, and that's what they're concerned with, right? And what is working for their child is really crucial. We have the elementary conferences twice a year. We've expanded those, I think you might have noticed in our calendar, so that they're not as rushed. We used to have them in a 3-day period. Now we actually take a 5-day period to have those conferences, providing a little more time. Middle school, we're always encouraging really good home school partnerships, and we work on that as a goal out of all of our offices. What is the best way? We certainly have the Power School portal, the parent portal, and we encourage parents, and we have a good number who check. Middle school is a time certainly when people start to have the children have some more independence, but and at the high school level, it's crucially important to continue to figure out how to engage with parents on their own child's growth, because that's really what they need and they care about. We've done a lot of work on what's more convenient for parents. Should we have some morning conferences, afternoon conferences, combinations, because people work different shifts. We cannot assume that, as we may have many years ago, that parents work a 9-to-5 type job. Our parents are working at all different hours. So we've taken that into consideration. We've taken into consideration things like maybe the parent can't come in, we can have a Google Meet. And so teachers say sometimes it's better if I have some time for a Google Meet instead of face-to-face. So any of that home communication that falls in there, because you remember going to your child's elementary or middle school conference, or maybe you're still going to your children's conferences, and they're important. But it's beyond that. But I think some of the changes we've made is to be as flexible as possible with the times and try to look at the need through the parents' lens. A lot of people do a lot of good home communication through newsletters or other items as well, and we encourage parents to come in and make appointments beyond conference time with the teachers. That's all got to continue because it's a challenge.
I just also want to add that one of the things we also are working towards at the classroom level is having the teachers engage more with the data as well. The elementary has some really great practices that we're looking to bring up into the upper grades as well, in terms of data teams and really taking a look at the data. What are the challenge areas for the students, so that they can also then put some tier 1 interventions right into the regular classroom setting. I think if you know your students and where they are, you can target that intervention on a much more regular basis within the classroom. So I think and I will say sometimes classroom teachers are a little leery of looking at the data. It's a little overwhelming sometimes, but that is a really big focus of conversation that we're having. That, as I said, they've been doing that practice for quite a while at the elementary, and that's something that we're looking to bring up particularly at the middle school level as well.
And I'm sorry, I have to piggyback on the comments for both Ann and Eileen. At Convocation, we had a very dynamic speaker by the name of Ken Williams who came to present, and he talked specifically about this challenge of achievement gap and opportunity gap, and really tried to center, and I'm trying this year, with this Every Child Every Day, and sort of borrowing on Ken's message. You start with the standard, and we don't lower an expectation, and we have the talent in the room at a team meeting, at a grade level meeting, at a department meeting, to be able to say, if the standard is here, I'm not going to lower that standard because the student was in the remote school setting, or because the student, is on free and reduced lunch. The standard is the standard. My question is, how do I raise that child to the standard? What's the accommodation that I might need for that small group, for that group of children? And we do have, if we stay focused on that, we do have the ability to really make those big and significant moves. It's about providing time, providing permission, and keeping that center stage, that is the expectation, that we will work to narrow the number of standards that we're going to necessarily expect, what is the most essential learning. But if I know that child has needs based on whether it's an IEP, whether it's a language proficiency, but this one thing I can't let go. I have to have the student be able to identify letter names and sounds, or whatever it might be, that's crucial, that I'm going to move mountains to make that happen. And so that's the work that we're trying to do. We're bringing Ken back. We're trying to figure out a date. I think we have a date selected to bring him back to work with our middle schools. We wanted to bring him back. He was booked for Election Day to work with our elementaries, but we've got him on. We've got a date reserved for next year, and that is our work ahead. That is what we're doing. And when you focus on the standards, it doesn't really matter whether we're talking race, ethnicity, students with disability, English language learners. We're talking about kids, and it's the standard, and what can we do to get whatever that child needs up to that standard.
Yeah, thanks, I get it. And I think, and the reason why I'm asking about that is because while it is important, of course, to have like the individual conversations with parents, when you have communities that are socioeconomically disadvantaged in such a small percentage, they can often operate as villages for each other. So if I'm, as a Black parent and I come to a PTO meeting and I see that data, as a Black parent, I'm thinking about how can we share resources, right? Maybe I can't afford a tutor, but maybe three of us can afford a tutor and have our 3 kids together. So I'm thinking of that way and like how it could be more collaborative, and because sometimes it is somebody reaches out and supports getting that kid up, needing help identifying letters and numbers. Maybe there are some folks in the community that can teach that through hip hop, which is going to be culturally, responsive to that community. So just, the individual thing, yes, so important, but I'm also thinking about ways in which we can collaborate so the village can also kind of, step up too.
Good point. Yeah, we, to your point, we have seen some success with some of that, and I think you've got some really good things to think about. I can think of, for instance, our Nepali community that comes to mind. West Hartford, you may know, has a large Nepali community, and at times people have come in and say, what can we do? And they were very, very engaged in the schools, and I think there was a year they were inviting our former superintendent to some of their big events because they wanted to be such partners with us. So that aspect of connecting with communities or community leaders, because maybe someone isn't as comfortable coming to school, but they know someone who is, and they talk amongst themselves. It's a very fair point.
Gayle? Or who, I'm sorry, Renee and then Gayle, yes.
All right, thank you. So I wanted to get some more information on the level of nuance that the teachers review. So I can see what the parents are seeing in the grade reports, and clearly you have a lot of data in your data warehouse there. So what level of data do the teachers get to review on an individual student level basis?
So that's a good question, because certainly when we get the data, it comes first to us, and so it's living up here, and we share it with department supervisors and key leaders to take a deep look at that, and then work with their teachers on a plan. So we are working with our leaders who work directly with the teachers to say, here's our results. Here's year over year, here's cohort, whatever way we want them to disaggregate it. But our main focus recently has been the high needs group. And that's what we led the year with. So we led off the year with the high needs group. They were writing plans as early as, they started to write their plans for this year in April. And the reason they did that was because they were beginning to get results from the previous year. And they were beginning to see how the previous year's interventions or plans were impacting achievement. So they started as early as April. We gave them the summer to write their plans. As the data came in, we continued to feed our leaders, math, science, social studies, elementary, all the different departments, with whatever data we had. And this goes beyond, honestly, academics, chronic absenteeism, behavioral data, tardy data, all kinds of things that they think what will make a difference for our students, and specifically our high need students are one of our real prime focus. And when the teachers come back early in September, we ask them to share the data and then to comment on the plan and give input to the plan. And so that is how we share. You don't want to overwhelm your teachers with all the stuff we have, but you want them to get the big picture of where the successes are, because success, in my opinion, really breeds success. And when you're a teacher and you see something working, you just want to double down on that and keep doing it and see if you can get further, or if there are new things. And where it's not, it's hard for teachers to see data that doesn't come out the way they'd like, but it's real, and we're all in it together. It's no one person's job, it's all of our jobs.
Can I piggyback one thing? Just at the individual level, I just want to mention our data warehousing. That historically, we had a platform called Performance Plus where the teachers, when they would come in, they'd be able to see all their individual students' data to include the subscores. That platform is got bought out and is no longer supported. We've transitioned to a new platform called Analytic View, and the teachers are just getting trained on that this year. But the teachers, when they're doing their own interim type assessments, which is our, I think we've talked about things like Ames Web in the past. iReady is the new one for mathematics. There are, teachers can see, and those tools give them kind of summary scores that are very similar to subscores on the big test. I can see how my students are doing specifically within writing, or on an oral reading fluency, or in a specific, with these specific numeracy skills. So those platforms teachers are utilizing on a regular basis, and it does help them to inform their practice on a day-to-day basis, in addition to what Ann described, which kind of is also the big picture and where we're trying to go as a district that are helping to form department and school-based plans.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I just wanted to ask Ann about this general trend that I'm seeing on the literacy side. If I go back, even to 2015, which I think was pre-pandemic, there seems to be sort of a general slide. I mean, I wouldn't say every single bar there, but the general slide is down, and it's really across all students of color, Asian, white, everybody. So I just was curious. I actually have two parts to the question. One is, why do you think that is? Is there anything that we can say? Why is those literacy bars kind of sliding? And my second part of the question is, what would we do to fix that? Because as everybody knows, we're going to be done with ESSER funds pretty soon, and there's not going to be like a lot of extra support. So I'm curious if there's a thought as to why that's happening and how it might get fixed.
So I would say that our discussions prior to pandemic were around, there's a flat trend to our literacy, up, down, but prior to 2019, we were looking at that to say, math seems to be moving forward. Is it because it's a named area? Is it because we are giving it extra attention? That's where we gave some extra resources. We were looking at that trend. We look at all the trends, but we were looking at that trend closely. And then after pandemic, it's really started to have some more impact state, Connecticut, and Dirk. But we were aware of that, and we had made a conscious decision because the math scores had been lower. So, I don't know if it's an effect because we did name math and we did put some very specific resources there, not only coaches, a new program called iReady. We put a lot of our time and effort there. One of the challenges in this work is to not play what we would call whack-a-mole, right? We're focused so much over here that something else slides. And I'm not suggesting it was that, but I'm just suggesting we were aware. And what we're hoping to do is take what we're learning in the math, especially with the what we call these PLCs, these small teacher groups that look at student, not only data, but student work. So an assessment just finished. In front of you, there's student work from 20 different responses, and looking at that deeply. So I would say the concern has been, before pandemic, it was why we're not seeing the growth we want. We were just flat. So a couple grades had gone up. 2018, Paul mentioned, we had seen some better performance there. One of the things that I want to take a longer look at is teacher movement. One of the things I'm finding is when you have some stability in grades, let's say, hey, this grade 8 team has been together for quite a while, and they have really great procedures that they've all been sharing. That seemed to be very helpful. I remember the 2018-19 year, and we had some really high marks, and I kept working in my capacity where I was Eileen to the extent I did with the department chairs, and we were very happy with, wow, maybe we'll have a breakthrough, and then pandemic, and then we went down. So I can only say that we were aware of the flatness prior. We're a little concerned. We are concerned with the dip. We're trying to figure out why it's statewide too. What's that factor? Why is it everywhere? Have kids gotten away somehow from reading? Have we? I've been talking to some folks in some other districts who've seen a change in that trend to try to figure out what's happening there, that they've made this little back upward swing in literacy. And I've been sharing that with Eileen and Carrie too, to say, what can we find out that they're doing that we may not have done? But those are the things we think about. And we're meeting with our literacy folks to bring their good thoughts into what they're seeing as well.
A couple of other things just in terms of working to address that is that building administration as well as the department leaders have very focused goals on particularly with literacy, and several of the buildings are focusing on math too, depending on how their performance has been. We talked a lot about that data analysis with classroom teachers, to help inform some very focused intervention for students. And one of the things we also want them doing is taking a closer look at the interim benchmark assessments. The state has actually come out with a number of benchmark assessments that we can be using in the classrooms that would provide more opportunity for students to practice and really be comfortable with the assessment, so that when they go to sit down, they're comfortable with what oftentimes feels like a very unnatural atmosphere. So those are a few just really targeted action steps that we're working to take across the board and working to address this.
Ethan, raise your hand.
Yeah, I'll keep this hopefully quick. It's more to be more general.
Okay.
Because those are the ones you want to improve on.
Okay, so it varies with, this is literacy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So it varies with between 10 and a high of 25%. So the low in this particular data set is about 10.7% in fourth grade, and then there is a high of 25% in eighth grade.
Math,
That's math.
Apologize.
That's
numbers
math.
3 or 4, that's math. Sorry.
Math. I'm sorry, after. Okay, so level 2, I'm sorry. So in this data set, and again, this isn't aggregated, this is each grade band, the highest, about 35 to 40% of the students are achieving a band 4, which is above grade level. And then at 3, which is also at grade level, another about between 18 and 28%, 27% at or above. And then your next two bands are level 2 around 20, somewhere between 16 and 20, and then the level 1 between 11 and 25. Thank you.
I promise. I know this is a score presentation, but as a teacher, this is one measure. There's so much about education and so much that a teacher does that's beyond this test.
Absolutely.
And so much learning that's going on in the interaction and the cooperation and the communication and all the stuff that the kids do. And it's frustrated me for years that so much weight was put on this test. No matter what I did as a teacher, it all came down to these numbers. So our vision of the graduate is amazing. We have great kids that are going off and doing wonderful things. It's important to look at the numbers and track the data and especially see where there's lower performance. But I don't want us to lose track of test scores are not.
I'm so glad you're saying that, Claire, because Tom used to always say we'll be informed by the scores, not driven by them. And I even want to pick up on, I heard the phrase high stakes test. The test is not high stakes for the individual students. The tests in the aggregate inform our work as a district, where we need to provide greater emphasis, where we need to provide greater scrutiny, where we need to celebrate great accomplishments. Level 1's an interesting one to disaggregate. I know that we had an uptick a couple of years ago. Anne was masterful at identifying, because we had some data that the state had for the first time published, time on items, and we had an increase in the number of level 1 tests because the students had come in and they hadn't done any work. They kind of logged in and they logged out, so it was really more of a test. I'll say a test refusal in a regard. But if you log in and you answer one question, two questions, and you decide, I'm kind of all set, your score report will come back as a level 1 and it will impact the overall district. But it was informative to us because it demonstrated for us, hey, we need to have better coaching for persistence with students, better understanding of what they're doing when they're in that test setting and not allowing, and some of this was really, I think it was a make-up situation, so students were kind of being corralled into a room and told to make this test up after they had been absent and they didn't really want to. So maybe some better conversations about why this is an important measure for the district and for the school and how it can help them. That became part of a strategy that we're after. But there's so much beyond just a score to be able to unravel and to know it, and there is so much more that goes on than just the singular day performance. But again, I applaud the report and the analysis that goes into it to help really a continuous improvement for the district. Absolutely.
But I do want to thank you as well, Claire, for saying it, because there's so much, and the principals, this is only one part of their improvement plan, and same with the department supervisors. They have other aspects that they're working on, and we give you a report to give you this, and we start to, it sounds like this is the only thing, but it's hardly, and I want to reassure you that is hardly the only thing. The vision of the graduate really are the things we want to reinforce every day, but we do want to keep our eye on making them ready for college and career.
Thank you. I want to say I echo the questions and concerns that have been raised. Thank you so much for this robust information. I also appreciate how, when you are reporting the information, and piggybacking off of Claire's point of you can't just go with the numbers alone, I always appreciate how you reflect on what contributes to those numbers and how to interpret them. I certainly know that we cannot look at numbers from a siloed approach, see the number and attribute it to this, or see the number and attribute it to that solely. If we truly want to know why the numbers are what they are, we have to be open and to receive the answers of what that could be. And I know from some of the results that show a pattern of poor performance, and when it's disaggregated by race, you all have often, and I appreciate this, made reference to opportunity gaps contributing to that. It not being independently attributed to race, but it's the opportunity gaps that lead to that. And that's important, because when you ask that question of the opportunity gaps, well, what does that address? What does that explore? What systemic matters may that lead to? And so I think with us being the way that we are as a district, and with respect to our policies and with respect to educating all children, we have to be open to asking questions, but also open to receiving what answers may come with that, even if that may have us to take a deep dive in, we have some growth. So thank you so much for continuing to have us to grow and for the information that is here. And with that, we will move on to routine matters, approval of the minutes. We have a recommendation that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of September the 19th, 2023. Is there a motion?
If I have an edit, should I not make a motion?
We could, a discussion, we'll go over that, yes. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Claire. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Renee. Discussion.
I request an edit to be made. The date is incorrect. We need to change it to the 19th. It's already been done and signed, so, but the book has the wrong date.
Duly noted. And so the recommendation is to have the minutes to reflect a modified date of September the 19th as opposed to September the 5th. All right. Yes. Renee.
Another requested edit is my name is spelled incorrectly throughout the minutes, so request that it be up to date.
All right. A second request to ensure that we have the correct spelling for Renée Kamauf's name. Thank you. Other suggested edits? All right, so I'm going to modify the motion. Again, the recommended edits are to have the date reflect September the 19th and to have the correct spelling of Renée Kamauf. So with that, with the recommended edits, seeking a motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting with the noted edits of September the 19th, 2023. I'm amending the motion. Is there a motion or approval of that? Is there a motion, rather?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Claire. Any other discussion? All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Thank you so much, and thank you for your careful eyes. Moving on to information and reports. Board members, do we have any reports from other boards or organizations? Seeing none, moving to future business, announcement of future meeting dates. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, October the 17th, 2023, here at the Town Hall, room 314 at 7 p.m., followed by Wednesday, I'll say once again, Wednesday, November the 8th, 2023, here at 7 p.m., we'll have our regular Board of Ed meeting. Then again, Tuesday, November the 21st, here at the Town Hall, 7 p.m., our regular Board of Education meeting. Do we have a request for a future agenda item? Ethan.
I would like to propose that we discuss having a finance committee for the Board of Education, given ESSER funds going away and given the fact that inflation continues to be a problem, and we just need to be, I think, spend more time than just a month on the budget.
Right. So just to ensure I'm receiving it well, you are requesting for an agenda item for us to have as an agenda item to discuss having a finance or forming a finance committee for the Board of Ed. Okay. So that is a suggestion for future agenda items. So that is something we will have. That is what you're proposing. Is that what you are proposing?
Requesting.
So you're making a motion. Okay. So can you state it as a motion, please?
I would like to have a discussion on the finance committee for the Board of Education of board members that we can look at to doing the budget and getting a better year-round picture of it than just doing it once a month, 1 month a year.
What if? Okay. All right. State it once again. I want to make sure also so Charlotte can get it as well.
We voted
Yes.
on this, didn't we?
We'll have discussion. So say.
Making a motion, I thought.
So state it once again, please, your motion. Just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly.
No, that's fair.
Yes.
That we have a finance committee for the board members to spend more time on the budget and the finances going forward.
Okay.
The motion to...
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
So is
Or-
the...
Go
ahead.
Claire and then Renee.
Is the motion to form a committee or have a discussion about a committee?
Well, I'd like to form the committee, but I believe we have to have a discussion about it. I mean, I don't think I'm that persuasive.
So we do not spend a month on our budget. We spend a month on the Board of Ed reviewing the budget. So that point that we spend a month on the budget is not true. So I would like to know how the budget process is laid out throughout the year, and maybe we could get a report to say, when do principals and department heads and maintenance and everybody work on the budget? What time, when do they implement the budget? When do they start developing the budget? How do they plan their 5-year budget out? And the fact that you keep saying we spend 1 month on the budget downplays what everyone in the district is doing that's responsible for the budget that's presented to us. It is presented to us to review, approve, scrutinize, cut, add to, everything, and we have a month for that. But the year-long process of the budget is not the purview of the board.
So, if I could respond, I'm talking about the board activity, not the administration. The administration is working year-round. We get involved when it's budget time. I'm saying, just based on my own personal experience, having worked in finance for various companies, it's a year-round process where you get a better understanding if you're doing it on a continuous basis than if you're doing it with a heavy emphasis at one time period. So,
Renee, you had a question or comment?
I was going to say what Claire said, so.
Okay.
The question she had.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? Again, the motion on the floor, and I'm hoping I'm stating it as to have a finance committee for the Board of Education to discuss the Board of Education budget on a monthly basis before the budget is presented.
to work on it continuously throughout the year with the administration.
So you and I sit on the Finance Committee and get a rundown of the current budget, where we are in our targets, where we're over. We get all the data on all the grants when they expire. This is put together each month for us to review. So you want another meeting with admin and department heads and principals to look at all of their budgets? And again, I mentioned this before, if we were a board of a hospital, would you want to be interested in the x-ray room's budget and the ambulance crew's budget and the pharmacy's budget, all of those budgets? Or would you as a board get the budget presented by all the experts within the hospital and then in that month scrutinize and look at all the different things that are proposed and decide whether you approve or disapprove, cut or add to the budget?
So I'm on the audit committee of some nonprofits, and you spend time trying to understand what's there on a regular basis. So my objective is to get a better understanding of what's there and try and come up with ways to find, working with the administration. I think it's unfair of us to just expect the administration just to be able to come up with stuff, and I feel we're putting all the work on them.
So, if I may, I remember this conversation from the end of the year last year, and one of the things, and I'm sort of hearing you say, the opportunity to understand all the components of the budget, and then I'm also hearing you say help administration. So one of the things I had, suggested. No, there's no negative to help, I don't think. One of the suggestions I had made last year, trying to understand this, is if we need a longer period of time to present the budget, if we need to spread the presentation out over a longer period of time, it would allow for greater absorption, maybe less, we go over less of the volume. The budget's voluminous, so maybe we go over less parts of it so that people can absorb it and ask more questions about it, as opposed to, I would just be honest, I'm unclear in terms of the construction of the budget and what we're doing, and from now until we come forward to you in March or potentially in early February, if you wanted us to start this sooner, what that would look like. Like I'm very clear on what you had said in the past about, hey, this is a lot to absorb, a lot to understand. Maybe we want more conversation. Maybe we want you throw some questions at us, and we have more time to respond. So to me, that's a presentation question more so than a committee question, because I haven't been on the financial examiners committee, but I understand the purpose there in terms of monitoring and really hopefully getting an understanding of the channels in which money is getting spent as you're talking about it, because that's an opportunity.
We do. It's a limited conversation just by the nature of it, because you're not dealing with budgets by month, you're dealing with budgets in total, and they're large numbers. I also don't expect you to go from stop to start, it would take time to make a change anyway, so I accept that. And I don't know what the right process is. It would be fair to say we got to start doing this. I just think, as a board, not that I need more meetings or anybody needs more meetings, but I just feel that there's more that we should be doing, and I feel like I'm not doing my part. So maybe it's just...
All right. So thank you. Appreciate the motion, and always appreciate you wanting to do more, especially with you, this being in your background. And I certainly hear wanting to be informed of the process, because we know that as board members, it is part of our responsibility to help issue the budget. And I also look forward to at least once a month getting an update of the Finance Committee, what has been discussed. And I think we could also take advantage of those presentations to learn more of what is happening and what is being proposed proposed. And that's why we're so thankful to both you and Claire for representing us within that committee. And so appreciate, again, Superintendent Vicinas, you being willing to present to us or share with us kind of where we are in a timeline of pieces sooner in a collaborative way. So wanting to be informed, certainly support that. However, with the motion on the floor as it is, I am going to call for the vote, but just want to restate to have a finance committee for the Board of Education to discuss the Board of Education budget on a monthly basis before the budget is presented, to work on a continuous basis with administration throughout the year. And so again, hearing the crux of it being a matter of working with administration with respect to establishing or reviewing the budget, that is the crux of the matter. Before we go to vote, your hand is raised for a question.
And I don't know what you and Claire do really on the finance thing that meets every month. One question I always had, and I might have said this before, is if that Claire and Ethan could sort of be the quote-unquote finance committee where the pieces of the budget, and maybe you are doing this, I don't know, but pieces of the budget could be discussed on a monthly basis. I mean, I will say, and I think this was said before, that most boards of ed do have a finance committee. We're one of the few that don't, and we're also one of the few that don't have a curriculum committee. That's a different story. But if Claire and Ethan are already meeting every month, like, why can't that essentially be somehow connected to what Ethan's requesting, which I think is basically just more understanding of the process of the budget. I mean, it is one of the biggest charges to the board is to, pass this budget, which is almost $200 million and is hard, for people to get their head around. So if Claire and Ethan are already meeting, I mean, could they sort of form in some way, shape, or form what Ethan is proposing?
What we meet on is the trends and where the variances are going. So, not really necessarily.
Claire, yes.
So it would be helpful if we could just know the timeline of the budget development. I'm foreseeing that each principal puts forward what they need, the department heads put forward what they need, and you might even say, it's going to be a tough year. I want you to give me your worst case cut, second worst case cut, and the best case cut. And everybody who has the expertise in all these different parts and all the different schools and all the different functions have to look hard at their budget and say, what staff do I need? What supplies? What all these things, and then we know that transportation and utilities and the negotiated contracts with the teacher and the healthcare, those are not fudgeable. They're so there's so many things and so many things involved in this. It's your business. That's what you do for a living, and I could see where just getting the approval part is bothersome because your expertise is in setting it in all the different parts of the company. But this isn't your company. This is the school district with people and principals that have been hired to run buildings, run departments, figure out the budget, look at curriculum, decide what they're going to buy, look at technology, decide what they're going to buy. How are you going to be involved in all of that?
So my hope is by understanding, looking for alternatives and just different ideas. I've always seen it work better when you have more communication and conversation and challenging back and forth than just, that's how I've always seen it done.
Yes, all right.
I think we've had this discussion, and my position kind of remains the same, but I'm along the same lines as Claire. I mean, I understand, Ethan, that you feel the need to want to do more and that the administration and the district is doing too much, but that's their job, that's their role. We'll say it again, that's their lane. Our lane is to review it, ask questions in a timely manner, and then approve it. That's our role. We are not to ask. We don't manage the budget. We don't create the budget. They give us the budget. We review it. and we approve it, and we ask for changes or modifications. Anything beyond that is not in the scope of the Board of Ed, in my opinion.
Any other questions or comments? All right, yes.
I just have a question about the motion. Are we voting to discuss it further, or are we voting on what the verbatim you stated?
We're voting on the motion on the floor, which is to form this finance committee. Yes. All right. Any other questions? All right. All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Nay. Okay, any abstentions? Okay, the motion does not pass. All right. Now, moving on to comments from visitors. Do we have any visitors here that would like to speak? Seeing none, we do have an executive session. 2, for the purpose of discussion concerning an attorney-client privileged communication related to the board's legal role in addressing personnel matters. And so we will excuse ourselves for this, and we'll have Attorney Jessica Ritter join us, as well as our superintendent, and we will come back at the conclusion of that. Thank you so much. All right, we're all here. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And with us having concluded our executive session, now seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ari. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Renee. Meeting adjourned at 9:57.